He always believed the world existed beneath his feet, and people were nothing more than obstacles he could move aside whenever he wanted. His name was Victor, a man whose wealth had bought him everything: respect, fear, and silence. But on that particular morning, something else was waiting for him. Something he never expected. Something that would make him realize wealth cannot shield a man from the consequences of his own behavior. Victor stepped out of his luxury car with his usual arrogance, his phone glued to his ear as he yelled at someone on the other end. He wasn't just angry, he was impatient, irritated, and full of himself, the kind of man who believed time was only valuable when it belonged to him. The market street was crowded, people rushing, vendors shouting, children laughing. But Victor walked through them like he owned the road, not once lowering his voice or slowing his steps. He had a meeting across the street, and he hated being even a minute late. That was when he saw her. A pregnant woman trying her best to slowly cross the road with 2 heavy bags in her hands. Sweat covered her forehead. Her breathing was heavy. She was clearly struggling, and yet no one noticed her. Or maybe they were too busy to help, but Victor wasn't busy. He just didn't care. He moved fast, annoyed that she stood in his way. He didn't ask her to move, didn't try to walk around her. Instead, without thinking twice, he reached out and shoved her by the shoulder to push past. She gasped, losing her balance, desperately grabbing the straps of her bags as she nearly fell forward. A few people gasped. One man shouted, asking Victor what he was doing, but Victor didn't look back. He didn't even pause. He just kept walking, still arguing on the phone, as if pushing a pregnant woman meant nothing. But for the woman, that push meant everything. Her breath shook. Her eyes filled with fear. She held her belly with both hands, terrified something had happened to her baby. A stranger ran to her, helped her stand steady, and asked if she was all right. She nodded weakly, but her face showed a pain she didn't dare voice. She whispered, "I'm fine," but she wasn't, and as she slowly walked away, holding her stomach, the people around her stared at Victor's disappearing figure with disgust. Victor entered the building of his meeting as if the world outside didn't exist. He sat on the high-backed leather chair, still irritated, demanding coffee before the discussion began. But something strange started happening. His voice started shaking. His heart began racing, faster than normal. Not with fear yet, but with confusion. Then, only 5 minutes later, electricity cut out. The room went dark, the air conditioner stopped, and the entire building shuddered. People panicked, phones buzzed. Sirens echoed from somewhere outside. Victor stood up, frustrated and yelling again, blaming the staff, blaming the city, blaming everyone except himself. But the sound that followed made his voice die. A violent crash exploded from outside, followed by screams echoing through the street. People rushed to the windows. Victor pushed his way through, demanding to know what was happening. And then he saw it. His luxury car, the same one he parked earlier with so much pride, was completely crushed beneath a falling metal sign from the building next door. A massive structure had collapsed during a construction error, landing directly on his car. If Victor had arrived 2 minutes later, he would have been right there, stepping out of the door, standing exactly where the metal crashed. People whispered that whoever escaped this was unbelievably lucky. But Victor didn't feel lucky. For the first time that morning, silence replaced his arrogance. His hands trembled as he stared at the destruction. He walked out onto the street slowly, unable to understand why he felt shaken. The same crowd that had watched him push the pregnant woman earlier now looked at him again. But their expressions were different: cold, disappointed, judging. A part of him wanted to shout, to tell them it wasn't his fault, that he didn't deserve to lose his car. But something heavy inside him told him not to speak. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, shame, and that feeling only grew when he saw someone in the crowd pointing at him. It was the man who had helped the pregnant woman earlier. He stepped forward and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "This is karma. You almost made that woman fall minutes ago. You care about nothing except yourself? Maybe now you'll..." understand what it feels like to be helpless. Victor's face burned. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't, the crowd murmured, agreeing with the man. And even though no one touched him, the weight of their eyes felt heavier than the collapsed metal crushing his car. He turned away quickly, but the guilt followed him. His mind replayed the moment he pushed her, the fear in her eyes, the way she grabbed her belly in panic, the way she stumbled. He swallowed hard. He needed to find her. Not because he suddenly became a good person, but because something inside him wouldn't let him rest without knowing she was okay. He walked through the market, retracing his steps, searching for her face in the crowd, but she was nowhere. The guilt squeezed his chest stronger with every passing minute. Then he noticed a small clinic nearby, people crowding around the front door. Something inside dragged him toward it. And when he stepped closer, he saw her. The same pregnant woman, sitting weakly in a chair, a nurse checking her blood pressure, a worried older woman kneeling beside her. Victor froze. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. But he knew he couldn't walk away this time. This was the moment that would define the man he truly was and the man he might become. The moment the pregnant woman fell to the ground, everything around her froze for a second. People looked. Some gasped. Some whispered, but no one stepped forward to help her. It was as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The man who pushed her didn't even bother turning around. He simply brushed the dust off his expensive suit as if he had removed some kind of dirt from his life. He kept walking toward his luxury car parked nearby, humming softly, completely unaware of the consequences that were already forming around him. The woman placed her hand on the ground and slowly tried to sit up. She winced in pain as her back throbbed, but she refused to cry. She looked down at her belly, gently rubbing it, whispering to her baby that everything would be okay. She didn't want her child to feel her fear. She didn't want the baby to sense even a moment of panic. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to stand again. But her legs shook. From across the street, an older taxi driver saw everything. He had been waiting for his next passenger, but the moment he saw the man shove her, something inside him snapped. He had seen a lot in life: poverty, disrespect, injustice, but moments like this still hit him deeply. He stepped out of his taxi and hurried toward her, calling out to her gently, asking if she was all right. When he reached her, he offered his hand, and she hesitated for a second, unsure if she should accept help from yet another stranger, but his eyes were different. They were warm, filled with concern, not judgment. She finally placed her hand in his, and he helped her stand up slowly. Supporting her weight with surprising strength for a man his age, she tried to smile to show gratitude. But the pain made it difficult. The old driver looked her over carefully and insisted she sit on a nearby bench. He knew that sometimes the shock of falling could be worse than the fall itself. He asked her name, and she quietly told him. He nodded slowly, trying to ease her mind with gentle words. He told her that the baby would be fine because she was strong, stronger than she knew. Meanwhile, the rich man opened the door of his luxury car with a smirk on his face. But just before he got inside, something unexpected happened. A group of teenagers who had witnessed the incident began recording him. They didn't say anything at first. They just kept their cameras pointed at him, their expressions full of disbelief and anger. The man looked at them with irritation, asking why they were filming him. One of the teenagers boldly replied that they had captured everything he did. The push, the fall. The moment he walked away without even turning back. The man's face suddenly stiffened, the arrogance fading momentarily. He tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just an accident, but the teenagers didn't buy it. They knew what they saw. One of them shouted across the street, telling the taxi driver that they had everything recorded. The pregnant woman looked up, confused. The old driver raised his head, and that's when the rich man noticed who they were referring to. He saw the woman sitting on the bench, struggling to breathe normally, her hands holding her belly protectively. His face tightened. For the first time, he realized the seriousness of what he had done, but instead of apologizing or showing remorse, he chose anger. He yelled at the teenagers, telling them to mind their own business. He threatened them, claimed he would sue them, shouted that they had no right to film him. but his voice shook just slightly because deep down he knew he had crossed a line that he couldn't erase. At that moment, a police patrol car slowly approached the scene. The teenagers waved at the officers, eager to report what they had witnessed. The rich man froze. He quickly tried to get into his car to drive away, but before he could close the door, one officer tapped gently on the window. The man laughed nervously and claimed he was in a hurry, but the officer calmly asked him to step outside, across the street. The pregnant woman and the taxi driver watched the scene unfolding. The woman didn't want trouble. She didn't want drama. She just wanted to go home safely. But the driver had a different view. He knew that people like the man who pushed her off and escaped responsibility because victims stayed silent. He didn't want that to happen today. Not after seeing the pain in her eyes. This moment right here was the turning point of the story. Not because something big happened yet, but because something inside both the woman and the driver shifted. She realized she wasn't alone. And the driver realized that sometimes standing up for someone was the only way to remind the world that kindness still existed. As the police began asking questions, the rich man grew increasingly defensive. His confidence faded. His tone softened. But it was too late. The teenagers showed the officers the video, and that alone was enough to make the officers take the situation seriously. They walked over to the pregnant woman, and when they saw her condition, their expressions changed instantly from neutral to concerned. They asked her what happened. She told them everything honestly, without exaggeration. She told them that she didn't want to cause trouble, but she was scared because she nearly fell on her stomach. The officers listened carefully, reassured her, and then turned toward the rich man with a different look in their eyes. And it was in that exact moment, when the officers approached him with stern expressions, that Karma finally stepped forward. But the real twist of what would happen next was still waiting just a few minutes away. The moment the rich man walked back toward the parking lot, he had no idea his entire life was about to flip upside down. He kept checking his phone, shouting at someone on the other end, complaining about deals, contracts, and people not working fast enough. He didn't even notice that everyone around him was staring at him for what he had done to the pregnant woman. Some were whispering that he should apologize. Others said karma would come for him soon. But he didn't care. In his mind, he was untouchable. He had money, he had power, and he believed the world moved for him. But life never works the way arrogant people expect. As he reached his car, he saw something unbelievable. His luxury vehicle, the one he bragged about constantly, the one he treated like it was his firstborn child, suddenly refused to unlock. He pressed the key repeatedly, but nothing happened. He started kicking the tire, shouting like a child throwing a tantrum. People behind him whispered, trying not to laugh. It didn't matter if he was rich right now. He looked powerless. He opened the hood and tried to fix it himself, but he knew nothing about cars. A crowd gathered, but no one stepped closer. After all, why would they help a man who couldn't respect others? The same pregnant woman he pushed was nearby, sitting on a bench and holding her stomach while another woman comforted her. She saw him struggling and quietly turned her face away. She didn't wish him harm, but she certainly didn't feel sorry, and this was the moment where karma truly stepped in. Out of nowhere, heavy clouds rolled over the sky. A storm began forming faster than anyone expected. The wind picked up sharply, rattling the trees. Dust flew everywhere. The man looked around, confused because the weather forecast had shown a clear day. But life had its own plans. Thunder cracked across the sky, startling the people in the area. Within seconds, heavy rain started pouring down. Everyone rushed to find shelter except him. He had no umbrella, no jacket. His expensive suit soaked immediately. He tried covering his head with his briefcase, but it didn't help at all. He ran circles around his dead car, blaming the universe, blaming the weather, blaming everyone except himself, and then it happened. Lightning struck a nearby transformer, causing a loud explosion. People screamed and ran farther. The shockwave caused his car alarm to start blaring, even though the car was completely dead before. The man fell backward into a puddle, completely drenched, confused, humiliated. His phone slipped from his hand, fell in the water, and instantly died. And the moment he picked it up and realized it was ruined, something inside him cracked. For the first time that day, he wasn't angry at others, he felt genuinely helpless. He tried to stand, but the mud made it difficult. His hands were trembling. His eyes started to water, something he hadn't allowed himself to do in years. He whispered under his breath, "Why is this happening to me?" And that's when someone approached him. At first, he didn't recognize the gentle voice. But when he looked up, he saw her, the same pregnant woman he had pushed earlier. She was holding an umbrella, and despite what he had done, she stood over him to keep him dry. Her expression wasn't hateful. It wasn't angry. It was simply human. "You'll get sick like this," she said softly. He couldn't speak. He felt a knot form in his throat. He had just humiliated her hours ago, and now she was helping him. When no one else would, she crouched slightly, even though it was uncomfortable for her, and extended her hand. He stared at it, shocked, unsure whether he deserved it, but she held her hand there patiently until he finally took it and stood up. The rain was still heavy, the wind cold, but somehow her presence made it all feel calm. He whispered, "Why are you helping me? After what I did to you, you should hate me." She shook her head. "I don't believe in returning anger with anger. Someday you'll understand." Her words hit him harder than any lightning strike. For the first time, he felt something unusual, a deep regret, a shame that made his voice crack. He wanted to apologize but couldn't form the words. His chest felt tight and his eyes fell to the ground. Then suddenly, she winced in pain and held her stomach. The man panicked. She tried to stay brave, but another wave of pain passed through her body. Her breathing became shaky. He immediately stepped closer, holding her by the shoulders. "Are you okay?" What should I do? Tell me." She whispered, "I think the baby, it's time." Rain poured harder, the storm roared. And there, in the middle of that chaos, a man who was once cold-hearted and selfish suddenly found himself terrified, not for himself, but for her. He realized he needed to get her to safety immediately. He tried to call for help, but his phone was gone. He shouted to the people around, but the storm was too loud. The pregnant woman could barely stand now. Without hesitation, he lifted her gently into his arms, holding her carefully, trying to shield her from the rain as much as he could. The very man who had pushed her earlier was now running desperately to save her. In that moment, something in him changed completely. And this is where the real twist of the story begins. The moment that would change not only his life, but the life of the woman and her baby forever. Because what happened next, no one in that place could have imagined. When the rich man opened his eyes the next morning, the first thing he heard was the soft beeping of a hospital machine. And the next thing he saw was the same pregnant woman sitting beside his bed with her hands on her lap. At first, he thought he was dreaming. How could she be here after everything he had done? Why would she sit near him after the humiliation and pain he caused? But she wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't even cold toward him. She was simply waiting, her face calm, her eyes tired but gentle. As soon as he moved slightly, she looked up and asked if he needed water. He couldn't understand her kindness. It confused him more than anything else that had happened in the last 24 hours. A nurse entered and told him he had fainted from stress and lack of sleep, and that the woman, the same woman he pushed, insisted on making sure he reached the hospital safely. She was the one who helped call for help. She was the one who rode in the ambulance with him. She was the one who made sure the doctors didn't leave his side. The nurse said if she hadn't acted as fast as she did, things could have been much worse. The man stared at her in disbelief. He had treated her like she was nothing. He had pushed her aside like her life had no value. Yet she did everything to protect his. The woman finally spoke, telling him she didn't stay to receive thanks. She stayed because she knew what fear felt like. She knew what helplessness felt like. And she didn't want anyone, not even someone rude, to go through that alone. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. He could tell she was nervous but still trying to be strong. The guilt inside him grew heavier than anything he had ever carried. His wealth, his cars, His expensive watch, none of it seemed important when he saw the way she cared for him after he had wronged her. As afternoon approached, a doctor came and informed the woman that she needed to be checked too, just to confirm her baby was safe. She didn't want to go alone, so she quietly asked the man if he could accompany her. The request surprised him, but he nodded immediately. It was the least he could do. They walked slowly through the hallway, and he noticed how carefully she moved, how protective she was of her belly, how fragile yet powerful she seemed at the same time. He felt ashamed that he had nearly put her and her child in danger. When they reached the obstetrics room, the doctor performed the scan. The heartbeat of the baby filled the room, strong and steady. The woman sighed in relief. And that moment, watching her eyes fill with gratitude, changed something inside him completely. On the way back to her room, she told him about her life. Her husband had passed away 2 years earlier in an accident, leaving her alone and pregnant. She was working long hours just to afford her small apartment. She walked everywhere because she couldn't afford public transport every day. She wasn't complaining. She was simply explaining her reality with a soft voice that made his heart ache. Meanwhile, he had money stacked in different accounts, more cars than he needed, and a house so big he barely remembered how many rooms it had. But none of it gave him peace or humanity the way her simple courage did. Here comes the hook, the moment that hits deeply and makes the viewer stay until the end. Everything changed when the nurse returned holding a small envelope. She handed it to the woman and said gently that her bill had already been paid. The woman looked confused. She said she never paid anything. The nurse pointed to the man standing beside her. The woman's eyes widened. She couldn't believe it. He didn't just pay for her visit. He paid for all her follow-up appointments, medical treatment, and even arranged transportation for her next visits. The woman tried to refuse, insisting she didn't want charity. But he shook his head and said it wasn't charity. It was responsibility. It was something he owed her, not because she asked for anything, but because she saved his life with kindness he didn't deserve. She started to cry softly, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her reality. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder and told her she had taught him something more valuable than any business lesson money could buy. She taught him humility. She taught him grace. She taught him what it means to be human. He promised her that he would continue helping her until she no longer needed it, and that he would also change the way he treated everyone around him. As night settled in, an unexpected moment unfolded. The woman started feeling discomfort, and the hospital staff rushed her to the delivery room. The man panicked, pacing back and forth outside, praying she stayed safe. He didn't know why he felt so invested, but he did. He wanted her and her child to be okay. After almost an hour, the doctor came out with a smile. The woman had delivered a healthy baby boy. When the man entered the room, he froze. She was holding the baby, wrapped in a blanket, smiling tiredly. She lifted the baby slightly and gently said the unexpected words that left him speechless. She wanted him to be the baby's godfather. The weight of that moment crushed every piece of ego he had left. Someone he had insulted and pushed had now trusted him enough to give him a lifelong role in her child's life. He felt honored in a way money could never buy. He whispered that he would protect the child like his own and that he would never let them struggle alone again. His voice trembled as he spoke, but he meant every word. The outrow carries the emotional closing. The man didn't just walk out of that hospital a better person. He walked out with a new beginning. He became a part of their small family. He helped the woman find a better home, supported her as she healed, and stayed present for every milestone of the baby's life. And every time he looked at them, he remembered the moment karma didn't punish him with cruelty, but corrected him with kindness. Sometimes karma doesn't hit us to break us. It hits us to wake us, to remind us of the humanity we've forgotten. And in his case, it brought him the greatest blessing he never expected, a chance to become the man he should have been all along.